good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love. All love. I got something here for you and me. Oh yeah, it's a medical marijuana. Whoa, whoa. I got something here for you and me. Oh yeah, it's a medical marijuana. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This week we have part 2 with Gil Luxembourg from Israel. This time we're going to talk about terpenes. And don't forget about every Friday and Saturday night on Clubhouse, my Late Night with Larawana show from 9 o'clock Pacific time. And now, here is Gil Luxembourg.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love.
Hi, and we're back for a second edition of an interview with Gil Luxembourg from Israel. And Gil has been involved as a patient in the medical cannabis program in Israel, but also as the a chairman for the first bunch of years getting it together. And for the last 5 years, he's been concentrating on terpenes. Welcome for part 2 of Gil Luxembourg. Hi, Gil.
Hi, how are you, Larry?
I'm doing great, thank you. So, give us a little bit more information about your background, and then let's do terps.
Well, let's do terps, but let's start with a let's say a quick rundown of what I've
Please.
done in the space and how it all comes back to terpenes. Starting out back in 1999, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, lost 37 kilos, which is roughly 70 pounds. Of my weight within 3 months, almost, died. The doctors lost hope because no medicine helped. And then one very, let's say, very, very important person in my life, which it was the gastroenterologist who was a military physician who took me aside and gave me 5-roll joints and told me, try this, it might help. And voila, it did. And that changed the course of my life because he took a huge risk of 20 years imprisonment in a military prison if he were to be discovered for giving it to me. And I was so naive that the first thing I did when I was sent home to spend the weekend at home after 3 months at a military hospital was go to my GP back home and saying, hey, this doctor gave me weed and it helps. And my GP said, well, it's illegal, but I don't oppose it. If it works, it works.
Uh-huh.
And when I said that back to the gastroenterologist at the army, his face turned paler, like 3 shades paler or 2 shades paler than the very freshly painted white wall behind him. He picked me up about a foot in the air, which was easy at the time with my weight. And he's a huge guy, and screamed into my face, I'm trying to save your life. Why are you trying to destroy mine?
Oh my, oh boy.
And just then it hit me how naive I was. I had no idea. So I looked it up and I figured out he was, he took a huge risk upon himself just to save my life. And at that point, I knew I could never repay him. However, as a military, as a soldier boy, we were raised to pay it forward to the next guy because there's always the next guy who will need it. So what I've done was establish the Israel Medical Cannabis Association, the patient organization, and promoted it from 7 patients in Israel and chaired it until we were 25,000 patients. So that's 2004 until 2016.
How many are
that time?
Do you know how many are in the program today in 2021?
We've exceeded 100,000 patients just a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So yeah, that's been huge.
That's fantastic. That's a very good growth. We have a little over 100,000 here in this little state of New Mexico. So what's the population of Israel?
Roughly 10 million total.
10 million. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's
total.
they're gonna get a lot more, I think, because we only have 2 million people here and we got 100,000, but it took a while to get there.
Well, it's
So
about the regulatory restrictions of the doctors and how they're allowed to prescribe and who they're allowed to prescribe in Israel because of the specific in Israel. It's for very specific conditions. It's not open for anybody that can benefit from cannabis, like in most states in the US.
Mhm.
So if you don't fall within the very strict regulatory restrictions, you're out.
So
And so we're waiting for full legalization with that front. Um, Fast forwarding a bit, and I am jumping over a lot of things
that's
I've
fine.
done for patients, but I'm focusing on the cannabis front. I have researched cultivation and extraction methods and processes of cannabis for 3 years with a Bulgarian university with under a unique license for research, 2013 until 2016 as well. And during this period of time, I came to understand that there are so many differentiators that impact the final product that we consume as consumers that it will be very difficult to stabilize the production from the production site and across multiple sites of cultivation. For the MSOs are basically fucked. I mean, to create a very stable strain across multiple platforms with the exact same kind of so that you know what you're expecting. If you go and get a Jack Herrera in one place and in a different state
Mhm.
that's branded the same,
Sure.
you should have the same product. Right now, you
Di
don't.
it's the same cultivar, different grower. Those techniques change everything. Different nutrients and food, and
And
there's a
different
whole
location, different
yes.
height,
Oh
different
yeah.
barometric pressure, different. There are so many differences,
Right.
and I've researched them in the attempt to find a way to kind of stabilize it. But the offside of this research was that I figured out that a lot of the differences of the chemovars within the same phenotype and the ones that are mostly impacting the perceived effect, okay, what we as consumers actually understand and report back versus the medicinal effect, which is based
Hmm.
on a very small molecule or a few very small molecules for a specific impact versus the total impact on us as humans.
Hmm.
Seeing that this changes between the chemovars, the main differences were not in the cannabinoids, they were in the terpenes. So that got me thinking, and going back to Professor Meshulam, my friend from the past, has been a close and I've had the privilege of coming to know cannabis when I was in Israel and when there was no YouTube.
No,
So
no,
I
no,
had
no.
to
What? I'm sorry, I missed the
no
word.
YouTube.
Oh, YouTube,
YouTube did not
YouTube.
exist yet.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
the only sources of information I had available back at the time were actual human beings.
Hmm.
So I had to get there and talk to people. So I went and I spoke to Professor Meshulam from the get-go, from 1999, and became in a relationship. Sometimes it was more formal and sometimes more of a friendly relationship. And then it went on with Professor Lumir Hanush, his right-hand man, who's the analytical side of it, and many more researchers along the way, and many more of the industry people that I met, were the people I had to meet through the beginning, because we didn't have any other means but actual communicate amongst one another. And so when I needed it a long time later in 2016, I just approached Meshulam and said, hey, listen, we have this thing with terpenes. He said, ask Lumir, he's more familiar with the chemical actual, analysis of what's going on in Israel. He can consult you as well. So I went to Lumir Hanush and sat at his desk. And as we were discussing like different analysis on his computer, Professor Meshulam comes back in with a patient case study saying, hey, Gilly, you're going to love this one. We have a patient here who's actually suffering right now because the government transferred her from one supplier to another, and they were both giving the same cut. So it's basically the same, clone. And after having been seizure free for 6 months from epileptic seizures, after being transferred, she's now back to seizures 6 or 7 a day, and it's really impacting her life. I mean, after, she's a young mother of 2, and she has not been able to pick up her kids until like 4 months earlier, because until she was seizure free for 2 months straight, she was afraid to get seizures with them in her hands.
Sure.
And so for the first time in her life, she had like a 4-month period when she actually experienced her children fully, embracing them, holding them, carrying them around, and all that things that we all take as granted, and that was taken away. And even 6 or 7 seizures and not 30 are a huge impact on your life when it comes to those small, so to speak, details. And when they looked at the differences of an analysis of the same cultivar between the 2 growers, they've seen that the only difference was in the terpene profile.
So the question is, how do you keep the terpenes, because there's a curing process and a drying process. So all that has to do with, keeping the natural terpenes in that cultivar in there. So tell us the rest of the story.
I'll tell the rest of the story. First of all, she was transferred back to the original supplier and got her relief back in 2 weeks after being seizure free again. She got back to her to her original, let's say, latest 4 months experience with actually living with her family and not being afraid that she's not able to pick up her kids, which is amazing. But as far as keeping terpenes or changing terpenes, manipulating and understanding it, back at the time, the mapping of terpenes included 232 terpenes altogether in cannabis strains and cultivars that were known and familiar. Since then, I've mapped, we've reached 435 terpenes in cannabis that are mapped. And we have mapped sub-profiles of profiles. And, I'll go back to the explanation, the general explanation, and then deep down, dive deep, because people may misunderstand and misconstruct. First of all, what are terpenes? Terpenes are mostly the scent element, the aromatic elements of plants and sometimes insects in nature. There are over 200,000 terpenes known in nature. And amongst this very wide variety, most cultivars, most of the plants on the planet have a very distinct expression of very few terpenes. So for example, in pine trees, you'll find maybe a dozen terpenes altogether. And the differentiation between pine trees will be in the ratio between those 12 terpenes. In cannabis, we have mapped 435 by now. So it's so much more complex with the aromas of the different strains and cultivars and whatnot. But also terpenes, as it happens to be, as they are protecting systems for plants. That's their purpose in nature. What happens is that when a plant is suffering from stress, it brings the manufacturing of terpenes up to protect itself from the specific element that is actually stressing the plant.
Which could be different things.
It could be different things. It could be changes in the ecosystem, meaning any kind of external stress, like a pest coming into the surrounding, a new pest in the environment.
Do you know what?
It could be a change of season.
Okay.
It could be a change in the construct of the actual soil. Could be a change in the feeding regime. Could be a change if you take a plant and move it from one location to another. It's just this change of the environment may impact that. There are so many different
While I have a question in my head,
Go.
do you know? I don't know if there's an answer to this. Are there certain terpenes that the plant would produce to defend themselves against the pest? Do you know what they are? And do
I
you think?
know of some ways of manipulating some of the terpene production expressions that are specific to specific pests or to specific
Mhm.
hormonal stimulants, so to speak, because not always I have the original stimulant connected to the hormonal response, connected to the actual chemical reaction of the production of terpenes in the plant. Even though I've researched it, not everything is fully mapped yet. It's in the process. But what we do have is how to stimulate the hormonal, so to speak, production, the hormonal systems of the plant to produce enhanced profiles or subprofiles, not necessarily unique terpenes, but groups of terpenes that the plant then produces much more of within the profile.
Mm. Do you
And
think?
actually,
Uh,
coming back later to it, I have a product to solve it, and actually something that I'm working on with a collaboration with an Israeli company to produce a specific product, not just a system, to enable large producers to better control their production of terpenes within the production site.
mhm. So my head was going to the area of maybe in the future there's going to be some terpene sprays that we can put on our plants that are natural and that will take care of mites and some other critters that get into our plants that really ruin everything. Is that, do you see that in the future? Can you see that happening?
I see that in the past. We already have a lot of those essential oils that are being sold on the market to treat against pests are
Mhm.
very rich in terpenes. They're just
Terpenes.
not marketed
Mhm.
as terpenes rich or as this formulation of terpenes that is impactful. They're marketed as an extract of this and this plant. So, for example,
Neem oil,
contains
like
neem oil
yeah, yeah, yeah.
contains a lot of terpene content. Oregano extract contains a lot of terpene content. So when you take those very, oregano extract and things like that. So there are many aspects to different organic kind of pesticides that are based on terpenes already. Um, so no, I don't see the future going that way much, at least. I do see, however, manipulation from a different side, where when we know what kind of pests are in the surroundings, we can sort of manipulate the hormonal systems of the plant to defend against those pests before the pests are actually arriving, so they
Mhm.
won't attack the cannabis plants.
Might that be planting companion plants around cannabis that produce, like I had oregano in the same yard as my plants some years ago. That interestingly enough, but do you think that's the way it's going to be, or
I think that's the way it should be, but I think the way it's gonna be is trying to create a different kind of method to stimulate the same stimulation in large
Mhm.
grow houses, because the problem isn't for the home grower. The real problem is for the commercial growers that are growing in huge greenhouses, and they're charged by the canopy,
Mhm.
and they can't really afford doing all, putting oregano around it. But they
Mhm.
can't afford stimulating the same kind of stimulations that oregano would produce. So we have a system in place that is kind of doing that testing right now, and hopefully we will have a product in the market early next year with this
Wow.
solution for greenhouses and for large scale operations. Right now we have solutions mostly focused on the end user, because based on my experience and as I said, the why that got me to really research and expand my horizons on terpenes is the understanding that it doesn't only impact the perceived effect, but it also has some future medicinal value that I can find out, because the proof is in the pudding.
Mhm.
Now it's about how do we map the way there, because, you know, if we can figure out how to help more people, that's huge.
Absolutely. There's so many conditions that cannabis works for. So in the last 5 years, you've been heavily into the terpenes, okay?
Yes.
And going from 200 and something to 400, I mean, are all these terpenes scientifically identified from other plants and so forth that you get to compare the molecules to and so forth?
Yes and no. Very few are not found in other plants that I know of. It's not that they're not found in other plants, it's that we did not find for every single terpene in cannabis the full scientific backing from other sources relating other plants, only from within the past, I think, 35 years. So we did a very, very thorough and deep survey, literature survey to substantiate things. And on top of that, we found like maybe several dozens of articles that were describing the same terpene and naming it in different names and
Hmm.
calling it as novelty, scientific, breakthrough, whatever. And then you go like, yeah, but those two are matching, or those three are matching. And so which name do we call it out
They
of the three?
they got
The,
to all
the
be
only,
they have to be the same, right?
they are the same if they're
Yeah,
chemically the same.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, but sometimes it is what it is, and that's what you find out when you go through a very, very deep
Hmm.
literature survey. And then sometimes we figured out that some of the really new terpene discoveries were insignificant because
Hmm.
they were like, uh, it, it doesn't mean that they won't be in the future, but
In
for the time being, they're insignificant because in order to detect them, you have to have like 10 pounds of extract, because they're in so low quantities that, you know, it's unfeasible to really test for them on the ongoing production of any product for the time being.
So isn't one of the real problems with terpenes the what, like I sort of mentioned earlier, just the way to capture them without them going away? You know what I mean? I know that
Yes
there's
and no. Let's put the thing in perspective, okay? When I'm looking at a problem, I'm not looking at it from the very truly scientific way of a pure scientist. I'm looking at it from the perspective of a very consumer centric perspective, which means that I'm looking at what the actual consumers consume and what it does to them. I don't care what's in the plant if it doesn't reach the end consumer. Okay. They don't report on what didn't reach them, they report on what did reach them.
Mhm.
Okay. So I don't try to analyze what's in the plant, which is something I do analyze. I do the whole graph of from the beginning to end consumer product and whatnot to understand the whole process of what's lost on the way. But then I focus on what's actually consumed. And within that, we're trying to understand how certain manipulation earlier in the stages of this production, or later in the stages of the production, or even post production, or when it comes to at the patient's hands, what type of manipulation will end in what result.
Hmm.
Because I want to map not just the terpenes within cannabis, but what they do to us as humans. Now, we have mapped, as I said, 31 effects that terpenes can actually elevate or reduce within cannabis.
Singly or together in some fashion.
In some fashion, we have found subprofiles, multiple subprofiles that impact each unique effect. So I know how to manipulate these effects to raise them or reduce them
Hmm.
in various ways. So we can actually match it not only to an effect, but to a palette. Because if your flavor palette is more one way or the other, like if you don't like limonene, okay, you won't take anything with limonene, regardless of the effect that it should bring you, because you don't like taste of it. That's a very simple, mathematical equation that scientists disregard when they're looking at things. Now, so I've looked at, okay, how can I replace within this formulation what other subprofiles exist in other plants or in other strains that are reported that don't have limonene, but produce the same subset of results, and then how I can kind of match make. And that's why the 5 years of mapping, it wasn't easy. And we're still at the infancy stages in in the way I see it. It's like there's so much more that we don't know than what we do know.
Right. Well, finally, we're allowed almost globally to do the real research, which only a few people have been able to do, like the professor and everybody else that's on the side. But the product that they're testing has to be good as well. I mean, about the terrible federal program here in the United States where they gave them crap in a joint.
Oh yeah, I know. I've heard of it. I actually spoke to one of the last 13 patients.
Irv Rosenfeld?
I spoke to Irv a few months ago and to another one a few years ago. And they both said the same thing. Even one of them sent me an empty can after he emptied it to Israel, just so that I'll have it in Israel to show around a few years ago, which was funny enough. Just as proof that this exists. Nobody within the Israeli government, nobody believed it until they've seen the proof.
We didn't believe it here. I mean, who knew that back in the 90s they were giving 300 marijuana cigarettes a month to these 13 patients,
They still do, to the only 2 patients that are still alive, if I'm not
right. I believe Elvi and Irv, I think, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: researching for the last 5 years the terpenes, is there one thing that surprised you the most, or just a bunch of little things? Is there some big, like, whoa? Was there a whoa moment?
I'll tell you what there was a whoa moment, and the whoa moment was when I realized the true fact that even terpenes have biphase effect in them.
Okay, what do you mean by biphase? I don't know what that means.
Okay, the biphase effect means microdose versus macrodose have different impact on your body. In some cases, some cannabinoids as well, like THC. Okay, if you microdose, you get one reaction, but when you raise your dose over a certain dose, you'll get a second reaction within your body. Okay, after you exceed some level of cannabinoids, so to speak, I'm not even sure of the word, but let's say flooding of the system.
Tolerance?
It's not about tolerance.
Okay, but like
because every person's tolerance is different, but THC will have a biphase effect on anyone. Okay.
So you're saying you found that in terpenes as well?
I've found that in terpenes as well, and that was a wow moment. Like, for example, with myrcene, if you have under 0.5% of the overall, like under 50% of the overall terpene content in your formulation, and yet under 0.5, like under 0.5% of the total content of the cannabis, formulation or content, meaning that usually you have around 1% terpenes at the end of the day when you test the final product that's reached clients. So when you exceed 50% of that with myrcene, you get the couch lock effect in a way that is very imminent and prominent and very distinct. But when you're using under this threshold, and usually it's around under, let's say under 0.45%, so that you have like a margin of error there, but you get a completely different effect. You get a soothing, maybe sort of uplifting, giggly effect from the combination of myrcene and the formulations. But within the same formulations, just raise the ratio of myrcene to increase to 51, 55%, and you'll get couch locked as hell. And that's just one example.
So let me just ask you about myrcene for a second, because I've seen
Yeah.
articles over the last 5 years or so saying that if you eat a mango before smoking or eating an edible, that can really enhance the effect. Now, do you find that to be true? Have you done any research on that?
I have not done research on that specifically, but I can tell you that your body doesn't really differentiate how you consume your terps. However, that being said, myrcene, when you consume it orally, if you were to juice it and then to put it into a sparkling juice, for example, if you put some CO2 in the juice just to have the bubbles,
Mm-hmm.
and then drink it while actually inhaling the terps, the impact would be much more bioavailable and
Right.
much more impactful on the actual CB1, CB2 receptors. Because what happens is, from my from my research and my understanding, and this is how I see things, cannabinoids are like the, take it even one step backwards, the consumption method. Like if you smoke it, or if you like smoking in a joint, smoke it in a bong, use edibles, take a beverage, whatever type of means of consumption, this is the vehicle that you're going to use. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the cannabinoids, and especially the THC, but not only the cannabinoids themselves, are more like the fuel that you're going to use. So you can take a hot air balloon, or you can take a rocket ship, but the speed you're actually going to be moving at, raising high and going down, is based on the ratio and the actual content of cannabinoids within whatever you're consuming. But the actual driver and the GPS system of where you're going to be, what views you're going to see, and what journey you're going to experience are terpenes.
So you mentioned carbonation in that juicing and so forth. Does the carbonation do something and help it?
Yes, yes. Well, carbonation, not decarbonation, carbonation.
Yeah, CO2. Like
Yeah, positive. Yeah,
that's in
yeah,
soda.
yeah, exactly. Actually helps the terpenes evaporate faster from within the juice. And
Wow.
if you're taking mango juice, you want to evaporate terpenes faster, because you want to actually smell them as you drink them and inhale them through your lungs, not just through your digestive system.
So that's the different sensory
Exactly.
systems that we have in our body. So doing it at the same time, that makes a lot of sense. So I have like these special jars that I use when I keep my cannabis. These are
Yeah.
like, and I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but they really hold the terpenes. Okay. And
That's
so
really good.
so do you think that there's going to be terpene therapy in inhalation, nasally and so forth? Because I've had jars that actually, like the bigger ones that you store like an ounce in or so forth, the mason jars that I've stored for a very long time. And then when I open the top, not only is there amazing, terpenes coming up, but I feel stickiness around the
Yeah.
edge of the rim. And if I take that with my finger and smell it, it's amazing. So when terpenes are evaporating and being caught in that jar, is that actually the stickiness? Is that actually terpenes?
It is.
Uh-huh.
It is a lot of it is terpene. Some of it is cannabinoid that have evaporated within the terpenes evaporation within the container, because of of the different chemical,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, processes that happen within the container while curing. But the main portion of it would be terpenes. But as you asked, it's very nice of you to ask, of this whole industry called aromatherapy. That's all
Sure.
terpenes.
Uh-huh. From different plants and
It's not
different,
only
yeah.
cannabis, but those are terpenes. And when we're looking at things from a chemical perspective, from a chemist's or any kind of pharmacist perspective, if you purify botanical terpenes enough, it doesn't really matter what the source is, if they will react similarly.
So when you say purify enough, when is enough? What are we trying to get out of
Oh,
there?
that's the threshold. We're trying to get out of there all of the rest of the terpenes and residues of other plant material and other things that may be caught alongside the terpenes chemically or otherwise. Because, for example, if I want to reconstruct a formulation, I will purify the terpenes singularly, then I'll construct the formulation, and then I'll repurify the entire formulation to get to the maximum purity levels that we can, so that it's not considered food grade but pharmaceutical grade. Now,
Mhm.
I may work with food grade sources, but unless I repurify them to my specifications, they will not go into my products. It's very simple. Because in food grade, you have a lot of, the difference is you have a full 1% of material that is not pure within whatever it is you're using. Or sometimes it's even more. Sometimes it may be 96% purity for food grade, whereas you need 99.9% purity for the basic of pharma grade. Usually it's much even purer than that. Now, that's the reason a lot of pharma companies are going for the synthetics versus the purified, because it's a lot cheaper to produce synthetics. But I don't know.
And you,
It's not in my vision to use synthetics.
so I agree, and that's why there's controversy about Delta 8 and THCO acetate because they're. Would you consider those synthetics because they're taking a molecule from cannabis and then changing it,
Uh,
or
because of I will call them synthetic modifications.
derivation,
Derivatives.
derivatives? Okay, so that's
Synthetic
okay.
derivatives.
Okay.
But for example, another synthetic derivative, by the way, the only one that I do use, but I do it myself, okay? It's called a synthetic derivative, even though there's no synthetic process involved with it,
Mm,
okay?
it's a naturally
Naturally
derivative.
derivative, but
Hmm.
it's called synthetic derivative just because it doesn't originally occur in the plant.
Not
And
even
that
in
is,
tiny, not even in minuscule. Okay.
couldn't find it.
Okay, I get you. So,
Hashishim.
yes, hashishine, absolutely.
And it's easy to produce it. I do it. I it's just a matter of how the science community calls it, and the process is not named organic, even though it is.
Hmm.
um,
So, where do you see terpenes going, in the near future? Okay, will it be a time to where you can like have a terpene cap and break it open and get some benefits that way? What kind of products do you see coming in the future for terpenes?
Well, I'll tell you from my perspective, because I'm focused on the cannabis space specifically versus the wide array of what terpenes can bring as benefits to the world, which I believe are much wider and vaster than the narrow space that I'm focusing on. But I believe that if you're not focused, then you won't get anywhere. So within our space of cannabis, I believe that terpenes will play a major role in both product development in the future from the commercial side of things. Um, there will be a lot of different infusions that are done. We see that in beverages, but we'll see it a lot more both in edibles. We see it a lot in vape pens, but we will see infusions back into flower, because we see around the world that a lot of the regulatory frameworks demand irradiation prior to the ability to sell products. And during the irradiation process, a lot of the terpenes are completely lost. So the product that clients get is, let's say, less than half of the original potency of terpenes that they would get otherwise.
Right. Well, there's so
So
many
you have to
factors.
reintroduce terpenes back, even extracted from the original
Right.
plant, from the original batch and reintroduced later. And, that's something that we are at Cannaboost on the development with the farm on how to do that during the cultivation process. But I have already developed and tested the protocols and the technology and how to reintroduce terpenes into those ready batches after irradiation, just prior to packaging. And we do it compliant with the local regulations with whatever company we work with, because every state has different regulations when it comes to the packaging facilities.
So you mentioned Cannaboost, okay? So tell us about what you're doing there, beside, specifically if you can.
Oh, yeah, well, Entourage Delivery System, IIW Entourage Delivery Systems, another small anecdote. The reason for this long name is the IIW. The company started as Is It Weed, because that was what I kind of thought when I first came back to Israel, to the medical system from being abroad for a bit, and coming across these new radiated cannabis bags. And I opened one and it was like, is it weed? And so that was the name of the company. And then it became Entourage Delivery Systems later on, and we are the owners of Cannaboost brand. Now, the brand itself, we build it so that we can present end users, the real consumers, with the benefits of terpenes, because so far we see that terpenes are used vastly within the production side, but nobody's explaining anything about the experience to the end users. So they're really not in a position of choice. Like when you go and buy something, you don't know if it's been infused or not. You don't know what actual terpenes are in there most of the times. Nobody tells you about it. So I wanted to bring the news of what terpenes actually do to you, to bring the ability of selection firsthand to the users. So we created the first terpene infused rolling papers that were actual dose controlled and stable, so that you knew that within batches and between batches, no matter what type of paper you select to open, it will be similar to the one you tested like 5 months ago and whatnot, and with a very long shelf life. Then we moved on to producing pre-rolled cones for those who don't roll or don't know how to roll or can't roll because of their disabilities, because we are focused on the patients and bringing value to the patients.
So
yeah, please.
Okay, so these are rolling papers we're talking about.
These were the original products that we came out with. Yeah,
right.
And we've got many more since, but yeah, please.
So are they terpenes specific, as one terpene, or an entourage of terpenes? Are there different
The
rolling
products we do-
papers? Are like 10 different kinds of rolling papers that have different combinations of terpenes in it?
Yeah, right now we have developed 31, as I said, different effects, and even though we tested 31 unique formulations, we only came out to the market with 3. Initially, we marketed them, we branded them under the strain from which we took the sub-profile, the original strain through which we have found this sub-profile, and we found it in many other strains. But because we found it to be confusing to the market, because they said, hey, it's nice that it's labeled Jack Herrera matching profile, but does it match other strains? Is it truly Jack Herrera? Like things like that.
Sure.
So then we moved on to analyze what the majority of consumers actually thought the effect was and described it as. And then we went out to market with a rebranding of it with the cones and all the other products, saying this specific one is uplifting because this is an uplifting effect from within the Jack Herrera strain, and that's the sub-profile that we infuse.
That's very exciting. This is very exciting to hear. Absolutely. When I roll joints, sometimes, I'll enhance it, not necessarily with terpenes, but I might put some hashish in it, and which is going to give me a couple of different effects, and or I might put some concentrate on the rolling paper myself by heating it up and liquefying it and putting it on there.
Yeah.
I've been doing that with hash oil since like 1969. I mean, that was something we used to do back then. And actually, back in the day, when we were allowed, well, when you're young, people smoke cigarettes. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but 50 years ago, you could smoke cigarettes in movie theaters and restaurants, and so when we went airplanes, absolutely, we would put some hash oil on the bottom of a cigarette, and you could smoke it in public, and no one knew. So what other products? So you have the cones, which is just a easy man's way of having the papers, right?
Yeah. And then
go
both
ahead.
those products, we developed the technology to produce them. So we have the machinery and the production lines and all of that, on the back end that we can also sell or license to producers and, have production lines that enable also THC and CBD infusions.
So where are these products currently?
Currently, they're sold online globally and in Israel in pharmacies. We're just approaching the global market after deployment of the local market because we started out as development company for those products. We didn't ever think that we'll have to sell them ourselves or be producers. But then COVID hit, and 4 of our contracts for production lines were canceled one after the other because of the beginning of COVID, and nobody really wanted to move anything. And 2 of the companies went bankrupt during COVID, and 2 others are still alive but delaying. And we decided that we're not going to delay. Like, it's been a year. It's time to go out with the products. So
Right.
we started a production line here in Israel, terpenes only, and only based on botanicals, not cannabis derived yet because of regulatory restrictions, obviously. And we sell worldwide. We have maybe a dozen stores out of Israel that approached us so that we already sell to, but we're doing the outreach these days to many, many more. But we do present many more products. We have also the terpene infusion cone, roller, which is basically like a very small, tiny. What my friend is saying to people is like, this is a deodorant for your joint. It's like this small, but it's like a deodorant roller that you can roll on your paper or
So it's some kind of like an infused thing to when I put the hash oil on my paper, you just sort of put that on the paper.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's so you could
that's
actually you can put that on any paper, whatever papers you like.
Exactly.
Wow,
Whatever you like,
that's
even your
brilliant.
pre-rolled joint that you bought at the dispensary,
Right,
whatever you
just
want.
put it on the outside of it. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So like how?
Put however much you want. One line is enough. But if you're
Uh-huh.
if you like a very heavy dose, put 2 lines.
What do you call that?
That's the roll-on. That's
A
Cannaboost
roll-on.
roll-on.
Cannaboost Roll-on.
And
Fantastic. And that's available now? I can tonight
that's available now on
to ship here.
iiwonblog.com.
To ship anywhere.
Worldwide.
Wow.
Hopefully coming January to Amazon.
So
it's
can
just
I
about shipping to Amazon and the delays of the last quarter. They don't accept new products. So early
So
January.
okay. So let me ask you this. How many
Yeah.
different SKUs in the roll-on do you have? Do you have like myrcene and limonene together?
No. We have right now 3 for
Okay.
all of our products. We're going to expand it to 6 by January and probably go every quarter, expand by 3, get the feedbacks from the market, what to keep and what not to keep, because we want to be very focused on our clientele. Now, if there is a demand that comes for any specific formulation, we can accommodate for anything. just a matter of our focus on how to present the value proposition to the end user without over-complexing it. Or, when you come to the booth and you see only 3 options, you can find something that matches you.
Mm-hmm.
Then after the first-hand experience, maybe you'll go and select out of 6. But when you're facing 30, it's like, oh, too much. I'll go by something simple.
So in the 3 that you have now, how many terpenes are in each one that are together, would you say?
We have the maximum, the one that is the maximum is 23 for the unique subset.
Uh-huh.
The minimal is 6.
Did you find that maybe some terpenes, like if you just had like 3 or let's say 6 in one roll-on, did you find that maybe some terpenes didn't go really well together in the ratios that you have them?
Not within the ones we came out with, but obviously
Right.
when we tested different ratios, we went and tested how it would impact. And then we tested which subprofiles are impactful on their own and in combination with other full profiles and subprofiles. Because when we want to increase or decrease a specific impact, maybe you won't like the taste of it in combination with whatever you're using. That may happen, it's a matter of taste.
What about effect-wise?
But effect-wise, we wanted to make sure that it will match the experience and the expected experience. So if you're taking the uplifting paper, unless you're putting it on a very, very strong high myrcene, already existing high myrcene product, and then you may get on top of the giggly effect and the uplifted effect some couch lock effect, because as I said, the biphase of myrcene, apart from that kind of ugly side effect, everything else matches exactly the expectation of being a bit more relaxed, taking a bit of the stress down, being a bit happier, having an uplifted, more joyful, more relaxing, more energetic experience, both on the mind, on the cerebral experience, energetic, and in the body, unless it's crossed with too high of a myrcene strain, and then
Right. So when you are smoking with one of the Cannaboost papers, okay, and which is infused with the different terpenes, and can you also can you smell the terpenes coming off?
of course,
Absolutely, right? So
absolutely.
So are these papers individually wrapped? I mean,
yes, they are, because we
okay,
wanted to have a controlled dose. We
there you go.
didn't want to have the wet wipes kind of problem, that the first is not the same kind of
Right.
absorbed as the
Yes.
last. So
You
we
don't have a
single
packet.
packed them.
Do you have a
We only
package?
we have a package of 50 for
Yeah, I know, but do you have
retail.
one with you? Do you have one to show us anything?
Not
No?
on me.
Okay.
I can pause and go bring one.
No,
but,
no, next time. No
next
pausing.
time.
No pausing here.
Not a problem.
We have
Next time.
about 5 minutes left. So think about what you'd like to
So
talk
let's run
about.
through it. Yeah, I want to talk about the future and what we're up
Right,
to
please.
doing. But first of all, let's wrap this whole thing a piece about Cannaboost and what exists already. We also have the spray. The terpene spray is a completely different product, and that's aimed at 2 specific user segments that nobody's really regarding right now when it comes to terpene products. The bong users, such as myself, obviously, I produced the perfect product for me, and
Of
then for
course.
anybody else.
Yes.
Hey, if you're not doing something that you can really use, that is meant for you, you'll have to go through so much more patient interviews or client interviews to really find the match. So it's much easier to develop something for yourself. But then we figured it works also for the plant vaporizing products, like if you use the volcano,
right.
and you want to increase the terpene content of whatever you're vaporizing, then it would work just the same for
So
those people.
would you spray this on the bowl of your bong?
No, I would spray actually the ground material,
Right, after you
or pre-grinding, just spraying the bud, letting it cure for like even a few minutes and then grinding it, or spraying the ground
Mhm.
material, letting it have 5 minutes to soak in it.
Okay. And then it's dry enough after that waiting period that it's gonna burn. It's gonna vaporize or whatever.
But it is very concentrated, so you should use like one of our sprays that's like 1 milliliter is matching like between 4 ounces and 8 ounces of material.
Wow. Whoa.
Okay.
So
you
there's
can use
there's
like
none of
one
this, right?
spray. No, it's like one spritz
A
on
spritz.
a spritz on an eighth
Okay.
would
Oh,
do the
okay.
trick.
Wow. Oh, that's great because you're not going to use an eighth up right away at all.
No, and so it
Yeah.
works.
So
And also
go ahead, please. We need to wrap up
that
in
in
about
the
2 minutes
future
here.
we'll have a product that will go in the bag and actually reintroduce the terpenes into your
Ah,
product, whether in the bag or in the container,
right.
so you can recure for 48, 72 hours.
See now, these kind of jars would be perfect because they just hold the terpenes and everything so well. So I can see, give it a little spray, and absolutely,
So
that
there's a
sounds
spray and a
fantastic.
new product that's not the spray that's actually meant to go in those jars to do just that, and that's coming soon.
Is that going to be like
And
it's not going to rehydrate, is it?
it's gonna do something of some sort of a rehydration, but
Yeah.
mostly a terpene-based
Okay.
rehydration. So it brings back the terp content to the
Right.
plant and revives it, but doesn't hydrate it too much because we don't want to overhydrate it.
Right. So,
Um,
where can people look at these products and order them? Because
okay,
I'm ready
there are
myself.
there are two websites right now. There are one for the Hebrew market and one for the international. It's iiwentourage.com. That's the international, and the Hebrew one is easier to remember. That's Cannaboost Papers. But by the time that
Is that
this show
.com?
is on .com, but by
Okay.
the time that this is on, we will have CannaboostTerpenes.com already operated and forwarding to both. Like you can select Hebrew or English and
Got it.
choose your destination.
When did you buy
Um,
cannabis? When did you buy CannabisTerpenes.com? How long ago?
Cannaboost,
Cannaboost
Cannaboost
Terpenes. Okay, gotcha.
Terpenes.
So,
Yeah, we're
so,
all about the Cannaboost brand.
and is Cannaboost.com?
Cannaboost.com is not mine.
Not yours.
Cannaboost Terpenes, Cannaboost Papers, and some
Cannabis
others.
Papers. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So cannaboostpapers.com, everybody, check it out. I know I'm going to because this is exciting to me. Is the roll-on currently available as well?
Yeah, the roll-on, the sprays, the papers, and the
Wow.
pre-rolled cones
So,
are all available.
give me an example. How much are 5 packs of papers?
Packs like of 50.
Well, yeah, like like a 50, like 1 pack. How much is 1 pack of 50?
Well, right now the papers are the most expensive product in relations to its
Sure.
size. So a pack of 50 is I think it's $50.
Okay.
Maybe
And
maybe I'm mistaken. It might be
all
100.
right. So the roll-on really excites me. What do you get for that?
But the roll-on is actually you can roll 50 joints with one roll-on,
Okay.
guaranteed. Probably more, but let's say guaranteed 50
Mm-hmm.
joints, and that is at a price range of 18.99 to 25, depending on if you buy just
Wow.
one or a triplet.
Very, very reasonable. Give out all the website names again, real quick, even the Hebrew one.
www.cannaboostpapers.com, www.iiwentourage.com, and www.cannaboostterpenes.com. All three will be connected to both websites. The Hebrew and the English will have a very nice landing page by the time this is out explaining, and I will send you to have in the description a discount code in perpetuity to whoever ever comes to this podcast to listen to it or hear about it, and
Excellent.
to be able to use the promo code. Now, please do choose the promo code and tell the promo code to everybody so that if they're hearing it on audio only, they have it too.
Absolutely, I will do that for sure. So, Gil, thank you very much. We could spend hours. This is part two, everybody, of our first interview, and we're going to be doing probably 6 more in the next few months. So, thank you,
Probably.
thank you, Gil.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Peace and love, and we'll talk to you soon.
Love, Larry.
We'll be right.
This is the Medical Marijuana Radio Show with Larry Love.
Thank you, Gil. Really appreciate your time. We'll be back next week with another great interview. Peace and love, everybody. Peace and love.